Caring for Kids God's Way, a biblical counseling certificate program in child advocacy developed by the American Association of Christian Counselors through Light University. Your ministry is to be a Galatians 6:2 helper. Ours is to equip you with the highest level of advanced training from the world's leading Christian counselors. 24 experts teaming up to create the most comprehensive child studies curriculum for the personal classroom. May the Lord bless your study as you begin caring for kids God's way.
Hi, I'm Dr. Tim Clinton, President of the American Association of Christian Counselors, welcoming you to our new certificate program in biblical counseling called Caring for Kids God's Way. I'm so excited about this program. Do you know why? It's because in just a few moments, this classroom is going to be filled with kids, packed with them. And what's interesting is there's so much influence that's going on in this room every day. And what these kids bring to this classroom every day is unique. It's a lot different than when we grew up. Let me give you some stats just about today's kids. Did you know that every 24 hours, 3,000 kids see their parents divorce? Did you know every 24 hours, about 3,200 kids run away from home? I wonder what the pain is behind all that. Did you know that every 24 hours, 1,500 kids drop out of school? Did you know that every 24 hours, nearly 8,000 kids become sexually active? Let's take it even further than that. In this classroom of, say, 20 kids, 1/3 of them have been sexually violated by someone they're supposed to be able to love or trust by age 18. Did you know nearly half of them are going to wake up in a home tomorrow where their biological father doesn't even live? Did you know that half of those kids who will wake up in that home tomorrow morning haven't seen their dad in the last 12 months? We could go on and on. There's a recent article in the New York Times that said, today's kids are reading, writing, and rushing. By age 5, we're basically out of control. My friend Dr. Arch Hart said that children today, Tim, as young as 5 years of age, are developing ulcers. That's not the way it's supposed to be. God loves kids. Jesus had a great affection for kids. There are wonderful verses in Scripture like train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he won't depart from it. Why? Because the power of influence. Kids have no advocates. Nobody will look out for them except for adults who care about kids. Reminds me of a saying from Fran Stott, one of our leading child experts. Fran said this: every kid in this classroom deserves at least one person who's crazy about him or her. That's why we did this program called Caring for Kids God's Way. It's because we wanted to let you know all the knowledge and skill and information that's out there, that's available now to help influence kids. They don't have to grow up with problems like ADHD and nobody understands it. They don't have to grow up with all kinds of stresses and pressures without anybody understanding it. They don't have to grow up in homes where there's divorce and people don't know what they're going through. More than that, kids are overweight, out of control, oppositional defiance, whatever. All those terms, all those issues are topics you're going to learn about in this program. You know why? Because we want child advocates. That's what we want. We want a generation of people who are committed to today's kids. My prayer is every church, every leader, every person of influence in the life of a child would go through a program just like this. In a nation who claims to be incredibly committed to our kids, they are our most underserved generation. May God take this program and radically use it to be a place of information and inspiration to touch the lives of kids. The Word says in Malachi 4 that we're going to turn the hearts of the fathers back to the children and the children back to the fathers. My prayer is that this is a beginning, a step in the right direction to get that done. That's what Caring for Kids is all about. They'll be coming here in just a moment. and you're going to be touching and influencing a lot of kids' lives. I want to pray for you just before we get started. God, would you take this program and multiply it? I pray that you would help a bunch of kids. Thank you for this student who has boldly taken a step forward to learn more, to be a positive influence. Lord, I don't know if they're a coach, a teacher, a Sunday school teacher, or just a mom or dad who wants to be a better parent. Whatever role, whatever responsibility, whatever position you've placed them in, God, bless them in that and save our children. In Jesus' name, amen. I think I'm going to go over to the board and get this classroom started. Caring for kids God's way.
He's a recognized expert in studies of depression, anxiety, and stress management. Senior Professor and Dean Emeritus of the Fuller Theological Seminary Department of Clinical Psychology, Executive Director of AACC International Relations, and author of more than 30 books, including Overcoming Childhood Fears. Caring for Kids God's Way presents Dr. Archibald Hart, Stress and Our Kids.
Welcome to this video called Stress and Your Child. I am very, very happy to be able to talk about this topic. It's a topic that's very close to my heart. And the video is based on one of my books called Stress and Your Child, and you might find this a very useful resource to have alongside you while you watch this video. The Earl of Rochester, a very famous earl in England, once said that before he was married, he had 3 theories about how to raise children. Now he is married, he has 3 children, but no theories. And I think that pretty well sums up the feelings of most parents. Raising children today is an enormous responsibility and is also a very, very great challenge. Get it right and you have a blessing. Get it wrong and you'll suffer the rest of your life. And even when you have done your best, things go wrong. I have sat with many, many parents, tearfully listening to their stories, how they have tried their best. They've done everything they possibly can to do what they could that was right for their children, and things haven't always turned out well. And that's because raising children today in this stressful world is an enormously big challenge. Raising Christian children in a secular world is an even greater challenge. But no matter how difficult the task, no matter how frustrated you might feel, no matter how many times you might want to just throw in the towel and give up on this parenting thing, take heart. Proverbs 22 verse 6 gives us a very clear principle. That is, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from them. Significant challenges for parents today include the following. Just as there is no perfect child, there is no perfect parent. You do the best you can. If your child is well-adjusted, totally reliable, consistently obedient, cooperative and unselfish, courteous and respectful, and never gives you a moment's trouble, send that child to the Smithsonian. They need to put it on display. If you fear you're doing a bad job, your children annoy you, exhaust you, exasperate you, worry, and you worry most of the time about them, then join the club. That's where most of us feel when it comes to raising children today. Being a child in today's world is not easy either. Trouble-free childhoods are a thing of the past. Gone are childhood days of boredom, free play, freedom from worry and anxiety. Welcome information overload, fast-track training, perpetual stimulation by cell phones, MP3 players, portable TV players, iPods, and internet blogs. And it's no wonder that our children are overstressed. Children in 1990 will graduate from high school having been exposed to more information than their parents in a lifetime. That's the degree of change that we are seeing in children today. So the challenge is, how do we raise children in a world that is literally going crazy? Let's take a look at stress and how it affects our children. Children are under greater stress than their parents were. No doubt about that. The world has changed. Expectations are greater. If children are going to succeed in any way today, they're going to have to apply themselves harder than their parents did. And many of them are just not going to make it. They're going to give up. Many of them are going to fall by the wayside. And part of the challenge of good parenting is, how do you deal with a child who, for whatever reason, is not really making it in today's world? Violence is on the increase. Depression is on the rise, and these two things are related. The increased violence we are seeing in teenagers today, for example, clearly related to the higher incidence of depression in teenagers. There have been many reports about the obesity, the fattening of children today. And while those reports have focused mainly on diet, I am here to tell you that diet is only a small part of the problem. The real problem is the stress that lies behind the overeating. And particularly one of the hormones that is produced in the body by stress, called cortisol, that tends to accumulate fat around the mid part of the body. So even the obesity problem can be traced back to a stress problem. In short, this is a dangerous world for our children today. Let's take a quick look at the stress picture. Cholesterol levels are higher in children today than they have ever been. As a consequence, the risk of stress disease later in life is very, very much higher. We will see people having heart attacks at ever younger ages, because stress now is no longer an adult problem, it is also a child problem. Stress is starting younger. Suicide rates have tripled in teenagers since 1958. The lowering age of stress problems is a concern. For example, anxiety is appearing in children. Serious anxiety, like panic anxiety, is occurring at a younger and younger age, and so is depression. We are now seeing significant numbers of children who are showing clinical depression. So stress is starting younger, and the fact is that most of it can be prevented. So what is stress all about? The most important principle I can get across to you today is this: don't just look at the bad things in your child's life for the source of stress. Sure, children will have bad times. And for some of that bad stress, some of the bad things that are in their life can be stressful. But frankly, most of us learn, and children learn also, how to avoid the bad things of their life. The most important principle to grasp is that the stress that is most damaging often comes from what we as parents perceive, and perhaps even the children perceive it also, as the good things of life. Those extra gadgets, the having 2 cell phones instead of 1, the overstimulation that often drives the stress hormones up can, in the long run, be very damaging to children. And we will try to understand that a little better as we proceed with this video. So let me clarify for you what the stress response is all about. Basically, stress is all about over-arousal of the adrenal system. Now, we all know about adrenaline. We all know about adrenaline rushes. We all know about how our adrenaline can get high. And the problem is that adrenaline brings with it a feeling of well-being. You feel so much better, and that's true for our children as well. They feel so much better. But in its wake comes the damage that we are seeing. Over-arousal of the adrenal system is not what the human body has been designed for. This over-arousal can come from the good things, the exciting things. It can come also from things that we're not always paying attention to. Loud noise. Children who live in environments where noise is exceptionally high have much higher cholesterol levels and much higher stress-related problems. This is one of the reasons why the poorer communities of our cities can be the source of greater stress. It's because the noise levels are higher. Prolonged television watching, video games. Video games are now being seen to be a very, very serious challenge to a child's mental health because it is a way of pushing the adrenaline response and keeping that going. And lastly, what children are suffering from is not enough downtime, not enough relaxation time. They are driven from morning to night, often late into the night, don't get enough sleep, and all of this contributes to the stress problem that we see it around us today. So, bottom line is that for children, there's too much coming too soon. Change is too rapid. The demise of leisure time, the fact that children cannot tolerate boredom, the fact that children are overstimulated, the fact that there is so much change taking place in their life. And what you might want to do is look at page 46 in my book, where I have summarized for you some of the changes that are impactful in a child's life and that can be stress-producing. And you'll see that some of those changes are actually look like good things. Now, add to all of that one other very significant problem, and it is this: there isn't enough family. Many, many children don't have enough family. Children in single-parent homes, for example, don't have enough family. But busy fathers can rob families of family time. And so this, coupled with the other factors I've talked about, makes for a very, very significant package of damage, potential damage for our children. There are three ingredients we need to think about as we think about stress and your child. Three ingredients to this problem. The first is the child's personality or temperament. That can contribute significant stress. The second thing is the child's environment. The situation in which the child finds itself. That can contribute stress. And then the third thing is the child's programming. We can program a child for high stress. We can program it for low stress. We can program a child to be able to respond to stress in a healthy way, or we can program a child to respond to stress in a destructive way. These are all factors that need to be taken into account. And in a moment, I'm going to take each of those three and elaborate a little bit on them. But first, let us have a look at the child. There's a difference between the personality of a child and the character of a child. Personality and character. The personality of the child is pretty much a given. You gave that to your children when you gave birth to them. We pass on our genes to them very significant ways. And in passing on our genes, we often pass on our personalities as well. Basically, there is nothing bad about personalities. The personality itself is not the problem. But what is important is their character. See, character comes and is sort of laid on top of the personality. It becomes the overlay. Character is the dressing up. So you may not be able to affect how you look, your appearance necessarily, but you can dress nicer, you can make yourself look a little better. And so character is that dressing up of your personality. And there is a lot that you can do to help a child deal with stress better in his or her life. So with personality, don't blame yourself. Don't feel bad or guilt. Don't feel guilty because something in your child's personality is not quite right. Character is the more important one. Character is what you shape in your child. It's modeled by parents. And it's modeled by the child's environment. And so we'll get to the environment in a moment. If you want to know something more about your child's personality, on page 76 of my book, I give a little personality assessment. And I provide it there for parents for the very simple reason that I think most parents struggle to accept their child's personality. Sometimes the child sort of seems to be a mirror reflecting your personality, and you can have quite a strong reaction against that. But the most important thing you can do for the child's personality, the most important thing you can do, is to learn to understand it, to learn to accept it, so that you can start from that point in helping your child deal with these issues in a more significant way. How can you tell if your child is stressed? There's a test on page 18 of my book for assessing your child's stress, but let me go over a few of the important issues with you that could reflect or could help you understand just how stressful your child is. It is important that you as a parent have a clear sense or clear understanding of how stressed your child is. Nothing can be more damaging to a child who is under a lot of stress and the parents have no idea, not a clue that their child is under stress. That does not provide for a good home environment. Now, a certain amount of stress is unavoidable, even necessary, I might add. It is the stress of life that shapes our character, that molds us, that builds our coping skills and helps us to prepare for the greater challenges that lie ahead. Children build life management skills in response to the stresses they experience as children. Now, the problem is that most of our children today are really living beyond the boundary of what would be considered to be normal stress. It is the excess of stress that they experience today that is the problem. Not the normal stress, but the excess of stress. It is the overlay. It is being pushed beyond the limits. It's having no recovery time, particularly. No boredom time, I call it. That it can be really damaging to your children. So the challenge, the first challenge I want to put to you as a parent is the challenge of how do I balance the stimulation, getting my children to do the good things, but at the same time giving them enough downtime. And we'll get to that, and I'll give you some suggestions in the second part of this video. Assessing your child's stress, there are several things you need to look at. There are really four main areas that you need to pay attention to as you try to evaluate whether your child is under a lot of stress or not. The first one I want to mention to you is the immune system. Whenever a child, and that's true for adults as well, but we're talking about children here, but whenever a child is under high stress, the immune system goes down. That's how we are created. That's how we are designed. We are not designed to build stronger immunity when our stress is higher, because if the body did that, we would probably self-destruct, because we would be better able to live under higher stress, and where does that all end? We would just keep pushing the boundaries further and further back. So the immune system is the first area to look at for your child. Does your child get sick a lot? Does your child experience the flu more frequently than other children? Does your child seem to be getting all sorts of infectious diseases a lot? Anything see, a child ought to have a good immune system, should have and be able to build resistance against many of these diseases. But when a child is under stress, that immune system becomes compromised. So that's the first area you need to look at. The second area you need to look at are the pain symptoms. One of the ways in which the body tells you that you're under a lot of stress is it increases your pain level. It does so by lowering hormones in the brain called endorphins that are really there to protect us from pain. And so when the body is under high stress, pain doesn't become lower, pain goes up because the endorphin levels come down. And so a child having a lot of pain problems, particularly most children suffer from stomach pains. They suffer from headaches, from general pain, a lot of pain symptoms. If your child is experiencing a lot of pain, you need to look more closely at the stress in their lives. Then there are the social symptoms, how the child interacts with his or her environment. Does your child fight with other children a lot? Does your child try to avoid homework? Is your child resistant? Is it reactive? And a clear sign of stress is a child who is acting out a lot, a child who is angry a lot, who tends to break things, or who doesn't respect other people's properties. All those sort of social interactive problems can mean your child is under too much stress. And then lastly, the fourth one is the behavioral, the behaviors. Depending on the age of the child, the behavior might vary. Very young children under high stress cry a lot. They cry easily. They tear up very easily. As they get older, that becomes less and less, and it becomes more an anger response. Goes from crying to becoming angry. They give up easier. They just don't have the persistence. They want to try harder. Some children develop tics. Some become lethargic. Some become fidgety, nervous, sad, or depressed. Some of them overeat. These are all signs that your child is under a lot of stress. Now let's look quickly at the child's environment. It's more influential than people realize. So you have to be intentional about where you live and how you live, because the environment you provide your children will have a very significant effect on their long-term stress outcome. For example, if you live in an environment where there's a lot of crime around you, where there are teenagers engaging in a lot of drug activity, that's not going to be a good environment, because that will influence your child. So you have to think about the environment of your child. The world has changed dramatically in the past 5 years. And there has been a dramatic rise in adrenaline levels in children. And with the rise in adrenaline level, that other hormone that also comes with stress is the cortisol. And that's what gives us the obesity and the anxiety. Now, it's the child's environment, you must remember, can be affected by a number of subtle things. For example, change. A child undergoing a lot of change is going to be under more stress than a child who has a stable, non-changing environment. This means, for example, that when parents divorce, when parents decide to uproot themselves and move across the country, go somewhere else, take children out of their secure environment, out of the friendships that they established, change is stressful. And you need to be aware of that. Page 46 of my book gives you a very good summary of some of the changes that you need to watch out for, and at least some of those changes can't be avoided, but at least what you can do is provide additional support and backup for your children, the sort of things I'll be talking about in just a few minutes. And then lastly, the child's programming. They learn from you, and you have to program your child to become not stress-free. I mean, that's a ridiculous idea, but to be able to cope with the stresses in their life in a healthy way. And that's where I want to focus my attention now for the rest of this video. What are some of the solutions? What are some of the ways we can program a child so that it can have a tolerance for stress and an ability to cope with stress that will make that child a healthier and a happier and more fulfilled adult. So creating a stress-resistant environment is my focus right now. How do we do that? It starts, first of all, by making your home a safe haven. A safe haven. I want to stress as strongly as I possibly can that a child who can come home from a very stressful school experience, maybe a bully, maybe things are not going right in the classroom, for whatever reason, high stress. A child who can come home and open that front door and enter into that home environment and feel safe, that this is a safe place, that child will have infinitely better coping ability for the stress out in the real world than the child who will come into the home where the home now adds a whole nother burden of stress. What are some of the things that are damaging to children in the home environment? What are some of the things that don't make it very safe for children? Let me list a few of them, and the challenge is for you to address these in your own life. First of all, lots of aggression. A home that's angry a lot, where people are yelling a lot, screaming insults. That sort of environment is very, very damaging to children because it adds another level of insecurity in their life that can rob them of the calmness they need to be able to handle the stress in their life. So acting out behavior. Parents who tolerate bad behavior by other children in the family are not being very helpful to the child who is under high stress. So try to control, we call this the emotional climate of your home. My wife, she's a beautiful person, and she's got some wonderful expressions. And she says that she literally, intentionally, puts a smile on her face every day when I come home from work. Now, can you imagine what a wonderful feeling that is? To come home from a busy, stressful day and walk through the front door of your home and there to have your key family partner with a smile on her face to welcome you. I just feel the stress fall away. Now imagine if you're a parent. Imagine parents. I know parents, when children walk through the door, they start nagging the moment they come through the door. There's not a nice warm welcome. It's not a safe place. Make your home a safe place for your children. Secondly, control the physical layout. Sometimes by just rearranging the beds or switching kids so they're partnering in rooms with one of the other siblings. Those sorts of mechanical planning situations can make a big difference to make a home a cheerful, attractive, a well-organized place. Help children organize their clothing, how they arranged their drawers, and things like that can all help to reduce the conflict between the parent and the child, and therefore make the home a safe haven place. It's also important that you do not use your children in any way. It's a sad fact that many parents will use their children. They don't love them, they use them. They use them to fulfill their own dreams. And so what happens is that they drive their children in certain activities, pushing them perhaps in a direction that they are not naturally suited for, but because they themselves did not fulfill their dream to become, say, a great baseball player or football player or whatever, and as a consequence they are being forced to do things that do not really match their talents. So don't push them to fulfill your dreams or to meet your unmet needs. They must be free. They must be free to become who they are before God, who God wants them to be, not to become what it is you want them to be. Children are also used as pawns in marital conflict. It's a sad thing, but a fact that many parents will play the children against the other partner. A mother might, for example, say bad things about her husband because she's angry and try to get a child on her side. Now, using children as pawns is not going to be helpful. It doesn't provide a safe haven for those children, a place where their stress can be brought under control, where their adrenal system can be calmed, where there can be some peace and tranquility, which they need as much as we do as adults. And whatever you do, make sure that you are careful in building your child's self-esteem. Now, if you know anything about my writings and other videos I've done, you'll know that I am a strong critic of the whole self-esteem movement. So let me substitute for what I think is a better concept for you as a parent to be working towards. It's not so much that we want them to esteem themselves. What we want them is to be self-accepting. To not have to not hate yourself, to not reject yourself. It's the negative side of all of that that is most damaging. And it's our attitude as parents to our children that helps them to come to the place where they accept the fact that, you know, this is who I am, this is who God has made me, and therefore I am content to be that way as I seek to train and seek to develop my life. It's also important as a parent, I'm still on the theme of building a safe haven for your children, it is also important that you try to not overdo things for them. If there's one thing that characterizes modern parents, it is that they are all guilt-ridden. Guilt-ridden. Parents feel guilty. They feel guilty because they can't give their kids everything they demand or request. They feel guilty because whenever they try to discipline a child, they feel guilty a lot of the time. And this leads to a permissiveness which is not helpful to a child under stress. A child under stress needs clear boundaries. A child under stress needs to feel when they want to push against a certain thing that there is a strong resistance against that. And guilt-ridden parents do not provide good boundaries for their children. So let's take a moment to ask yourself this question. What do I owe my children? Because if you don't think this through, if you don't really evaluate what it is you owe your children, you are likely to find yourself much more at risk for doing things you shouldn't be doing because you're driven by your guilt in your life. So let me take a moment to go through with you some of the things you need to think about in terms of what do you owe your children. You do not owe your children every ounce of your energy or every moment of your time. You do not owe them 24-hour-a-day chauffeur service. You don't owe them down payments on a house or car when they grow up. You don't owe them babysitting service. You don't owe them any of these things. You have to understand clearly what it is you owe your children. What ought to drive you as you tailor your life to what you want to do for your children. This is what you owe your children. You owe them a sense of personal worth. And you show that by showing them respect. You show that by saying things like, I'm proud of you. I'm proud that you backed off that argument. I am proud that you didn't do something that was unsavory. Give them a sense of personal worth. You owe them consistency in discipline. And in a moment I want to address that issue because I think that perhaps in the area of discipline more than any other area, parents are creating more stress than they really should. You owe them privacy and respect. Respect for their personal space, respect for their belongings. I made it clear to my children when they were growing up that bedroom is their bedroom. It's their space. I am not going to intrude on that space. If I come to the door, I knock at the door before I enter. And start doing that when they are very young, and it could make all the difference in the world to your own attitudes toward them. You owe them the courage to say no when other parents are saying yes. You owe them honest, forthright instruction in sexuality, in building relationships. You owe them solid values around which you can build their characters. You owe them a spiritual foundation. You owe it to them to help them build a spiritual foundation molded by your own modeling of your relationship with God. So these are some of the things that you need to clarify. Get straight in your head so that you're not driven by guilt to do things that in the long run are damaging to your children. If they're not damaging, at least they are, it will raise their stress level unnecessarily. All right, building a safe haven home for your children is the one big thing you can do. The second one you can do is you need to help to stress-proof your child. Stress-proofing your child. I love that concept. I love it. It's like stress inoculation. You know, you learn, you teach your children, and you react to your children, and you behave towards your children in such a way that you are actually giving them an inoculation against. You're proofing them. You're protecting them against the stress in their lives. Now, right at the outset, let me say, do not try to protect them from all stress. I must confess that as a parent, because I am by nature somewhat guilt-ridden, I wanted to try and protect my children from all stress. And even today, they are grown up, I have grandchildren, and I find myself, even with my grandchildren, wanting to run interference for them. You know, if I could take the punishment, I would gladly do it. I mean, if I could pay that traffic fine, I would gladly do it. Anything that would relieve them of pain. And that isn't necessarily a good thing. That isn't a good thing. And so there are several ways in which you can protect your child from stress. You can proof them against stress, and I want to mention a few of them quickly. The first very important principle for stress-proofing your child is the issue of sleep. So let me start with that one. Current research shows that our children are underslept by about 1.5 to 2 hours a night. 1.5 to 2 hours a night. That is the average child. The average child is not getting enough sleep. There's been some research to show that a lot of children, for the first hour or two of school, are sleeping during the class period, so that they are tired in the morning. They just do not get enough sleep. Now, there are many reasons for this. One of them is perhaps we allow them to stay up too late. Part of the problem is that a lot of family activities take place in the evening and often will go late into the night. And when they get to school the next morning, they just haven't had enough sleep. This will affect their learning. It will affect their attention. It will affect their tolerance for stress. They will become more irritable. They will get angry easily. And all of this just makes for a bad stress package in your child's life. And so a very important principle in helping a child's stress response recover is to ensure that they get enough sleep. Now, how much sleep? If you've read some of my books, you will know that I preach the doctrine of 9 hours of sleep as the minimum sleep need for a healthy adult. And children actually need more sleep than that. So take a bit of time there. I have some suggestions in my book on how you can improve your child's sleeping patterns, make sure that they get to bed early, and these are very, very important principles that you need to pay attention to. In order to improve their sleep, you've also got to pay attention to the amount of stimulation they are getting. It's a sad fact, but you need to know it, that noise levels are too high today. Most teenagers turn the volume up on their CD players or on their sound systems to the point that it aggravates us. And when that sound aggravates you, trust me, to go and do something about it, because if it's aggravating you, it is being stressful to them. It is very important that we pay attention to the stimulation level that children are experiencing all the time. You should build into their daily schedule some downtime. When they don't go from one activity to the other. You know, all right, you've come home now, go straight away, go do your homework. When you've done your homework, then I want you to do this, then you're going to do your chores, and it boom, boom, boom. It's one activity following another with now no recovery time built in. That is very destructive to children. It's very, very stressful. I know some parents where they put their children into special schools for gifted children, and these children have to get up 5:30 every morning to catch a bus to go to the special school. Now that's very admirable. I mean, those parents are being very, very thoughtful for their children. But if your child is going to get up 5:30 every morning to go to a special school, and then comes home from that school and there's homework to do late into the night, gets to bed at 11 o'clock, and getting up at 5:30, and doing that for several years in their childhood, trust me, that person is going to have problems when they are in their adulthood. So we have to be sensible, and we have to build in boredom time. And when your kids are saying to you, I am bored, you know you're doing the right thing. And that's because all around us, the world is overdriven in the lives of young people today. It's true for us as adults, but I'm not talking about adults right now. But that principle needs to be applied to your children. And what it might mean also that you need to teach your children some relaxation exercises. Particularly if you have a child who is suffering from anxiety disorder of any sort. You need to build into their life relaxation exercises. I provide guidance for that in the book, so please feel free to go back there and pursue that in a little more detail. Also, you need to provide more physical outlets for your children. Exercise is good for everything. Stress is bad for everything, but exercise is good for everything. And it's good because primarily its function, not only does it help to keep our weight down and get our body into good physical shape, but it also helps to burn off surplus adrenaline. So children who are playing video games, who are on the internet, blogging, or listening to loud music, their adrenaline is being driven up. That's why they do it. That's why they enjoy it. And exercise can help to lower that adrenaline because it burns off adrenaline. That's what the adrenaline is there for. It creates what is called a fight or flight response. That's the classic term for what stress is all about. And exercise burns off that surplus adrenaline. And parents who are neglecting to ensure that their children are getting good exercise are not helping them at all build a stress-proof life. It's also helpful to teach your children how to set boundaries for themselves. Children will often acquiesce. They'll say yes to things that they should be saying no to. And they say yes to things because no one has taught them how to say no. No one has taught them how to say no politely, how to say no in a non-offensive way, how to say no without getting angry. If I learned anything from myself, it is that my problem is that I only say no when I'm angry about something. One needs to learn to be assertive in the other areas of one's life, and you teach your children how to say no, and they'll be the better for it. Now, let's turn to stress-free disciplining. Stress-free disciplining. Perhaps of all the things I've talked about, disciplining children has got to be the biggest challenge of all. Particularly in these days when parents are guilt-ridden, when parents tend to be too permissive, where parents are confused because a lot of psychological influence has sort of perpetrated the idea that you've got to be careful how you discipline your children, and so on. So let me give you some suggestions about how you can discipline your children in a way that does not add stress to yourself, or certainly does not add stress to your children. Ann Landers once said, Show me a family run by children, and I'll show you a set of embattled parents trying to buy love. There's a lot of truth to that. Now, the key to stress-free disciplining is to start by clarifying for yourself the difference between discipline and punishment. What causes stress is when parents punish children. And I am a strong believer that there is an important difference between punishment and discipline, and this is the difference. Punishment is, in essence, a sort of getting back, a sort of taking revenge. You're in the kitchen, you're overwhelmed, you're having guests that evening, the meal isn't going right, and little Billy walks in with feet full of mud and stomps all over the kitchen, and you've told him 1,000 times not to do that. So what do? You get angry, and you might smack him, or even if you don't physically do anything, you might grab him by the arm and take him to his bedroom and throw him in the bedroom, lock the door, and tell him he's not going to come out, or whatever. That is punishment, and punishment never, ever teaches a child anything. Punishment can be very destructive. Punishment is usually an act of anger. It's performed in anger. Punishment is usually involves withdrawing your love. You are manifesting a behavior that is not perceived to be very fair by the child, no matter how young the child is. Discipline is different to punishment, in that discipline is focused on changing the behavior. So you might do the same thing in response to some misbehavior on the part of your child, but it could be discipline or it could be punishment, depending on whether it's done in anger, depending on whether it's done as an act of revenge to hurt the child back for what the child has done to you. So discipline is focused on changing the behavior, and that's where you have to shape your parenting. It should be free of anger. It should be free of revenge. Should not be. If you feel right now that what you want to do is hurt your child back for what that child has done to you, it's better if you delayed your discipline at that point. So there are 5 rules for stress-free discipline. Not punishment, but discipline. The first step is to clearly understand that a good discipline gives adequate warning ahead of time as to what behavior is not acceptable. If Billy runs into the kitchen with feet full of mud, and this is the first time he has ever done it, and no one at any point in the past has ever told him that he shouldn't do that, it is totally unfair for a parent to punish that child for that behavior. So you start out by ensuring that all behaviors you identify as inappropriate have been labeled as such. I encourage parents to have a little slate, a little board, a whiteboard in the kitchen even, where you write down behaviors not allowed. 1, feet full of mud in kitchen. And every time a behavior occurs, the first time it occurs, it goes on the list, and you sit down with the child and say, that behavior is not acceptable. That's the first step. You have to define the problem that you will not allow. Then the second step is this: establish a consequence. Establish a consequence. I don't want you to do that. The next time you do it, this will be the consequence. No television for 500 years. I'm exaggerating. But the consequence, it doesn't matter what the consequence is. The consequence, there must be a consequence that is fair, that the child sees as fair, and clearly understood. And you must remember that young children don't have good memories, so you have to remind them all the time. So you establish a clear consequence for unacceptable behavior. Having defined the behavior, the clear consequence. Then the third step: always give a warning. Good discipline reminds a child ahead of time. It's been raining several hours, children want to go out and play, and out Billy goes into the yard. you remind Billy, Billy, remember, you must not walk in with mud on your feet. If you do, you will go to your bedroom and there will be no television for the next hour, whatever the consequence is. So you warn, you try to anticipate. You see, the goal of good discipline is to change the behavior. Fourthly, apply the consequence with absolute consistency. The biggest problem parents have with discipline is they're not consistent. They will discipline when that behavior occurs one time and not on the other. And then lastly, make allowance for forgiveness and restoration. A parent who shapes a strong spirit of forgiveness is going to build a strong child who is capable of dealing with life's blows and will be able to cope with the stress that faces. And in closing, let me say this. Whatever else you do, make sure that you provide spiritual resources for your child. Don't overlook the importance of praying with your child, praying for your child, of modeling a healthy faith in God, of modeling a godly spirit of forgiveness. Be consistent. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. God bless you as you build stress-free children.